Hello, my dear viewers. This amazing story will be very instructive for you. It is very interesting and beautiful. I wish you enjoy watching it. Vicki has always considered herself exceptional, not like everyone else. From the outside, this is what it looked like. First, Vicki graduated from school with a gold medal. Then she entered the medical school without any problems a year earlier than her fellow students, having received a diploma and also a red one. And she chose a profession for herself as an outstanding general surgeon. Why outstanding? Because in some countries and in our country, including surgery, it is generally considered not a female occupation. This was taught to girls at the institute from the first year. The most popular expression in the department was a female surgeon as a guinea pig, and neither a woman nor a surgeon. Not that it bothered the students in any way. By and large, no one cared about this, since none of the girls, at least from Vicki's group, were going to take up the scalpel. At best, they dreamed of plastic surgery and tried to master the simplest of operations. Lip correction, lump removal, and radio frequencies. But since the winter, this action has been seen as at least a matter of money, and they left it to others to improve the statistics on the involvement of women in complex surgery. But Vicki was not offended by this attitude either. She simply set a goal for herself and confidently moved in its direction. It was believed that without the patronage of a girl, a surgeon would not find work in a more or less decent hospital. But Vicki managed this without anyone's help. Here you like it or not, but at least subconsciously believe in your exclusivity. So probably it happened with Vicki. Rather with Vicki Johnson, as despite her age, they called a colleague, even those who were much older than her. But the day happened in her life. At first, without any clear explanation, she was transferred from a practicing surgeon to an office for receiving patients. The maximum that was now allowed to her was to pull out a plaster of Paris flying into the ear of a beetle or into the neck of a tick, take a limb, and open a small abscess. Vicki was at a loss for a whole month, believing that this was some kind of misunderstanding. And now they will return her to her original place. But nothing has changed. Then she began to walk more persistently through the offices of the chiefs, demanding intelligible explanations. I even got to the Ministry of Health with my question. Apparently, someone somewhere has already given the go-ahead to explain to her that she was never exceptional. Just up to a certain point, she didn't bother anyone in particular. But a couple of months ago, for some reason, she refused to operate on one important patient who wished to get the service of a surgeon out of turn. Those who were in line closer needed the operation much more than he did. That's why Vicki refused. She remembered it well, but then she did not attach any importance to such a fact. And this little man turned out to be a very important person. At the very least, his authority was enough to ensure that Vicki was suspended from the operation for an indefinite period. That's all there is to know about exclusivity. Then things got even worse. But that was Vicki's own fault and not Providence at all. She rushed to defend the truth with even greater zeal. I got to the regional prosecutor, who was very polite with her in words and promised to look into everything and figured it out, of course, in his own way. From the surgical room, Vicki was generally transferred to nurses. It turned out that everyone had everything, seized, paid for everything. Everywhere there were people with a special philosophy, part of which, by the way, was this very formula about a guinea pig. But even such a turn did not arouse resentment in Vicki, but this time only because it was the real disaster in her life. And who is offended by a hurricane or a volcanic eruption? They run from them, hide from them, save from them. The last thing that can be saved. So Vicki just hid and waited to come out of hiding and look around. On the way to night duty, she went to a small shop not far from the hospital. In the evening, there were almost no people here. Basically, people went shopping during the day to drag their relatives and friends to the wards of the guests. Today, the picture was the same. Only a bum was on fire near the radiator in the lobby, and some 2 guys wandered among the shelves, trying to find something on them. Vicki bought a baguette, 4 sausages, and 3 bags of coffee with cream, her usual supply for the night shift. She had already paid the clerk and was opening the door to the lobby when the guys approached her, without taking anything from the shelves. "Listen." One of them, lanky with black stubble on his face, turned to her rudely. "Give me $10. Not enough, but for Vicki, lost in his own thoughts. And such a manner of the guy's itself, a completely inappropriate request, was really incomprehensible. "Deaf or what?" Another guy spoke and took out his hands from his pockets, on which there was no living place left from tattoos. "Give me $10. "A better steward?" "Yes, the steward," the lanky man repeated after his friend, grinning. "Are you completely out of your mind?" Vicki frowned and continued to open the door. "What other steward do you need? Go wake up." Tattoos pressed hard on the door and rested his boot on it, preventing it from opening all the way. Vicki felt that the threat had already really looked back. But because of the rack with notebooks and postcards, the counter with the cellar from this point, there was no surveillance camera in this store at all. There is only call for help. And she wanted to scream so that the saleswoman could hear her. But the lanky rudely shoved Vicki into the lobby and closed the door. "But why do you complicate everything?" he said, and grinned. "After all, they asked for nothing at all, hundreds or what. You're sorry, but then drive all the money. Let's see how much you have in there." And he held out his hand, waiting for Vicki to give him the wallet. The guy took out a folding knife from his pocket. The blade gleamed in the light of a single lamp. "God," Vicki thought, frightening her greatly. "What nonsense. I don't even believe it." She opened her bag, felt her wallet, and was about to give it to the bandits, when, unexpectedly for everyone, the 4th participant in this scene spoke up, whom no one seemed to notice until now. It was a bum who had been silently watching what was a bum who had been silently what was happening for a long time. "Leave the girl alone," he said, and his voice sounded firm and confident. Vicki and the guys started up and looked at him. He was a man of short stature, a little long but broad in the shoulders and with strong legs. He was wearing a disheveled shirt, the same cotton trousers, felt boots with ears and a shabby ear flap. Once perhaps they had signs of a rabbit or a hare. It was 15 frost outside, so the man was grieving. Near the long section of the battery. "Whose voice is this from the garbage? We will share with you. Man, don't worry. So there is enough paper for the towel." Without saying anything, he took a few steps to the side of the guy who was talking to him, and almost imperceptibly, as if lightly punched him in the jaw with his fist. The lanky one collapsed on the tiles, on the floor, as if under the skin of a tire. His friend, seeing this, moved a little to the side and stabbed the man twice in the stomach with a knife. He grimaced in pain, but did not stop and went towards. The guy jumped in front of him for a couple of seconds, posing as an experienced fighter, but suddenly he changed his plans, rushed to the exit, and ran out into the street. Very soon, from the roof, and in appearance it all happened so quickly that Vicki did not have time to fix the events in her head. She stood for some time with her purse outstretched until a lanky man with an uncomprehending look stirred on the floor, looking around the lobby. Only then the spring, which was inside the girl, cracked down and did it in such an unpredictable way that Vicki surprised herself. She kicked with all her might in the stomach, trying to get up the guy, and was going to do it again. But the lanky one began to think and managed to jump back. Then he got to his feet and ran out after his friend. At this time, the bum joined the wall and sat on the floor, holding his stomach with one hand. On the shirt quickly spread, blood stain. Vicki finally came to her senses. "You need urgent help," she said, and bent over the man. "The hospital is very close here, and I work as a nurse there. You can get there. I will help you." The man looked at her. There was no pain in his eyes. only endless sadness and pity. "Here you are," he said, trying to get up. "I applied there the day before yesterday, but I don't have any documents either. Not that the policy, and I'm not registered anywhere. They asked me not to disturb them anymore. I'll arrange everything," Vicki assured him. "Don't worry. There is no one in the hospital now, except for those on duty, so no one will tell you anything. And thank you for standing up. You really shouldn't have gotten involved, but now I am responsible for you, so don't mind." The man was able to stand up and slightly holding onto his shoulder. Vicki smiled for the first time. "Don't thank me," he said. "Maybe I wanted to end up in the hospital in this way." "Stop it." He's joking. "You still have to." The girl could not help smiling. "In this case, you miscalculated a little. Let's go slowly." The hospital was about 200 meters away. Most of all, Vicki was afraid that the runaway guys could return and wait for them somewhere around the corner. But they got to the reception room without incident. In the department, Brandon hurried to help Vicki. He was also on duty that night. They undressed the man and sat him on the couch. Vicki examined the wounds. They were not deep due to the fact that the shirt, although old, still protected the body from the knife. One blow generally fell casually. He bleeds especially because the wound was external and nothing held back the blood. Having done an ultrasound and making sure that not a single internal organ was damaged, Vicki injected the man with painkillers and washed the wounds. Then he independently sewed up the entire outer one and installed drainage in the inner one. That's all. Having finished the work, the girl exhaled. "Will you live? By the way, for all this turmoil, we never introduced ourselves to each other. My name is Vicki. And you?" "Thank you, dear girl," said the man. "I see that you are not just a nurse here. You surprised me." "It's a long story. I will say briefly that I have surgical experience." "So do you have a name, or is it a great mystery?" "Kevin. My name is Kevin. If you need to write down, tomorrow they won't trample me on the street again. So I think the police will need to be called tomorrow. Still, you've been attacked. You don't need the police. I beg you, don't worry about me. There is nothing criminal. I am the most common bum. I don't want us to create me under interrogations, and they will start pulling you too. But the bastards need to be punished, and they might hurt someone else. I'll deal with them when I'm better. You don't have to worry about this either. And you say the most ordinary bum. So it's not that common. Once you are sure that you can punish these idiots, who are you really, Kevin?" Vicki looked at him playfully. "Here you are, an ordinary nurse with surgical experience," the man replied. "I'm an ordinary bum with experience in punching in the face. Everything is simple and clear." Vicki helped him into his hospital gown. "Fine. Tell me, if anything, did they hang unsuccessfully from above on the fence? You know, with peaks, such fences. I always thought it was dangerous stuff. I'll talk to the manager if he asks. Let's go to the room." "Well, let's go." The next morning, Vicki did not go home, but stayed for a part-time job. I really wanted to sleep because the night turned out to be stormy. At 2, Zero, another guy, was admitted with beatings and concussion. There was only one free bed left in the wards, and Superintendent Vicki is bound to have questions about Kevin. Vicki had to defend him and still managed to avoid the help of the police. For some reason, she immediately trusted an unfamiliar man and believed that he himself would deal with those guys, and you don't have to call the police. At 6:00, she changed his bandages, gave him a couple of injections, and went back to the store to buy herself something for breakfast. When she returned, the manager was already throwing thunder and lightning. His voice was heard in the corridor. At the very exit, Brandon ran into the restroom, having managed to change clothes and turn in his shift, and warned Vicki that Harrison was looking for her, and his mood is disgusting. But Vicki managed to mentally prepare for this and went into his office, ready to stand up for herself and for Kevin. So it seemed to her, at least. "I'm watching you, Vicki," Jacob began in a raised tone. "Life doesn't teach you anything." "Are you talking about Kevin?" the girl asked calmly. "Which Kevin?" "The patient who was brought in at night," she explained. "I'm talking about a homeless person who was not delivered by ambulance. And you picked it up somewhere in the alley. What is this number? And I see your hands are itching from the previous work. You are already on probation, and you will never return to your previous position." "Okay, I didn't understand who I brought. So why didn't Johnson call him to sew him up?" "He is our surgeon, not you. You know Johnson yourself," she objected with the same calmness. "Vicki, it's rare to be sober on duty, and the wound is not so difficult to address. If this is some convict from the colony, a fugitive. No passport, no certificate. Who is he anyway?" "His name is Kevin, and I didn't find him in the alley." And he walked towards us. "I met him at the front desk. Yes, in words he can be called the Pope. And if you are a fugitive or killed someone, you will go as an accomplice. Do you understand why you didn't call the police?" "Jaco, why the police? Even if he is a bum. Are there few of these who come to us in winter with frostbite? We don't call the police every time. Either frostbite or cut wounds. I didn't retreat with the manager. In general, I'll work out why I'll transfer my nerves to you for the last 2 weeks. And goodbye." "How so?" Vicki did not expect this from her boss. Very simply fired. "What did you expect? Let's bring half the city of homeless people here. We are so compassionate. It's a pity for everyone. I can even traditionally third you for exceeding official duties, so do not go into the bottle. Otherwise I know you. Say thank you that, of your own free will, you will settle down in some kind of almshouse. You will be welcome there. I can even give you the address." "What about Kevin?" "With which Kevin?" "I didn't understand again, Jacob." "Nothing with this. He was taken to the police station for identification." "But how is it?" Vicki began to lose control over herself. "He has wounds, drainage, he needs dressings, medicines. They'll take care of him. You yourself say that the lungs will survive the wounds. You saw a guy brought in with a concussion. Until now, he cannot come to his senses. So if it's yours, what's it like, Kevin? What if it's him so in one night at once, too? Coincidence?" "What a nonsense," Vicki said in an undertone. "Exactly." The manager nodded his head. Nurses sew up wounds, installing drainage, and instead of changing ducts, the perfect brat. Everything is free. I have a meeting now. Vicki staggered a little and left the office. My head still does not fit what happened in those 15 minutes. She did the right thing. How could you leave a wounded man on the street? But she didn't call the police. She sewed up the wound herself. Maybe Johnson should have been woken up, but he would certainly start asking unnecessary questions. Then call Harinos. Vicki went into the room where she left Kevin in the morning. He really didn't exist. The cops took away, realizing who she was looking for with her eyes, said an elderly man with a book in his hand. "Did you ask him anything in front of you?" They asked for their names and offered to walk with them. Nothing else. Didn't introduce themselves. The man thought. It seems that one called himself Sergeant Downey. Yes, exactly. I also thought about fishing. So, Carl, I feel like going. Did you name your department? No. He didn't say anything about the department. Okay, Vicki said quietly and left. Its exclusivity, which began to crumble a few years ago, has now completely melted away. Her fall seems at first a misunderstanding. Stopped at the lowest point, all arrived underfoot. Only the earth and sky were covered with clouds. And again there was no resentment in her. It was not possible to hide and wait out the hurricane. He overtook her here too, in her ghostly hiding place, but she could no longer torment about it. It was as if she had been freed from some unbearable burden. I should have done it myself a long time ago, quit the hospital and looked for my luck elsewhere. And why was she waiting so long? What did you hope for? Thoughts about the fate of Kevin did not leave her. She must find him and try to help. If necessary, even shelter him at home. And what does she live alone? Friends who could ask stupid questions. She does not have time. Now it's full, until the accumulated funds run out. So she decided. I packed my things, ran an application for payment, took it to the manager. She didn't say anything to him and went home. It seemed to her that she had only to lie down in bed, and she would fall into a sound sleep. However, having taken a shower to have breakfast, Vicki forgot herself only for half an hour. It turned out to be impossible to really fall asleep, because the thoughts about where Kevin was now and what would happen to him next were constantly climbing. Vicki got up, washed and dressed, went out of the house again, because incessantly thoughts about where Kevin is now and what will happen to him next. Vicki got up, washed and dressed, went out of the house again, because incessantly thoughts about where Kevin is now and what will happen to him next. Vicki got up, washed and dressed, went out of the house again. Where could they take Kevin from the hospital? Logically, how did she imagine her? Delivered to the nearest branch. With this, Vicki decided to start. She got into the minibus and drove to the third branch. There she asked the duty officer if she could speak to Sergeant Downey, hoping that she was not mistaken with her logic. She was lucky to be here and really worked, and moreover, was now in her place. 5 minutes later, he came out to her. A very young boy, apparently recently returned from the army. Hi, Vicki greeted him. Hello. What do you want? The sergeant looked at the girl carefully. I'm from Vicki Johnson Hospital 4. This morning you were with us. They took away a certain Kevin Johnson from the ward for identification purposes. Yes, it was. And what did you want to know? I wanted to know about his future fate. He's got an injury. He is okay. Just a second, said the sergeant. Went behind the partition to the duty officer. There he picked up the phone and called someone. Sandler, he said into the receiver. Hi, it's Smith that's bothering you. Did they bring a homeless person to you this morning? Don't know what's wrong with him? I mean, do you have it now? Ask about him? Yeah, at lunchtime. And where? So. Okay. Don't swear. Okay, that's all for now. Vicki looked at him questioningly. The sergeant spread his hands and said, At lunchtime they took him somewhere and where it is unknown. How is this possible? What are you worried about? I'm his doctor. Vicki lied. I'm worried about the patient's health. Sorry, I can't help. That happens. Do you know how many customers are brought in and taken away here for the whole day? You can't follow everyone. Do not worry. I think they'll take care of him if something happens. Vicki rolled her eyes. Yes, it has already happened to him, she thought. And you've already taken care of. Further questions were meaningless. To express their dissatisfaction with this guy generally seemed redundant. He saw that Kevin, maybe 10 minutes while I drove him to the department. Okay, Vicki said, I get it. And where, in principle, could he be taken away? No idea. Maybe to the court, or maybe to the hospital for an examination. Or were they released at all for lack of any claims? You won't guess. Many places they could. I see, Vicki concluded. Goodbye. With a worried look, she went outside, not knowing where else to turn for information. Fatigue hit with even greater force. Her head was full of pain. No, I urgently need to sleep and put my thoughts in order. Otherwise, there will be no sense from her in this state. And Vicki slept that day until the very next morning. Going to work, she suffered at 8, 0, listening to regrets from colleagues about her fate. The work became unbearable. Vicki arranged with Brandon to fill in for her for most of the remaining shifts. He agreed, especially since he owed her 4 shifts. Brandon was the only one in the hospital with whom she was able to build a friendly relationship. He did not keep his distance from Vicki, as others did, as if they were afraid that the bad luck of the former surgeon would somehow be passed on to them. Listen. Vicki decided to ask Brendan when they sat down to have lunch with him. Maybe you know how you can find a person who has no registration, no car, no policy, no insurance. There is nothing. Is there any place where you can turn to? You are the day before yesterday's patient, for example. They took the man away and his trace was lost. Brendan thought for a moment, pouring tea into a cup. I think, he said, only through the police. No other way. Probably as it is possible through the registry office. But then again, having a request from the police or the prosecutor's office. Yes, I was in the department. There is no sleep, no spirit, but you don't need to go to the department and to the territorial unit for migration issues. If they don't know, then hardly anyone knows at all. I only know the first and last name, so they will give you a whole list of namesakes. Everything will be easier to find there. I just don't understand why you do it. However, it's none of my business. Understand? Question removed. Sorry. Yes, I don't really know anything. For what? I just feel like I have to help this person. But you do. The ground under your feet is on fire. She thinks about a completely unfamiliar bum. You already need to look for a job, and preferably away from here, because sadness will put a spoke in the wheel if you start looking for a medical line. I understand that, agreed Vicki. Thanks for the tip, Brandon. About work, I think you don't worry. Vicki really understood all the alignments in which she now had to plan her immediate future. The Fourth City Hospital was considered the best in the city and even in the region. Her reputation was excellent. So many people wanted to be treated here. At their place of residence and registration, they are the heads of one of the departments. Jacob, although he had a bad character and treated his staff without any reverence, was an influential person in regional medical circles. Sometimes his influence even went beyond the scope of his position, so the head physician, he could oppose his will. It was said that now he should take his place, and no one doubted this. And with horror, everyone expected global changes if this happened. They also had no doubt that Harrison began to possess such power not so much due to the rigidity of his nature, how many connections in the highest offices of the Ministry of Health. All the other hospitals in the city knew this man very well. Many even took from him a bad example in all its manifestations. Therefore, he hopes to get a vacancy in any of the hospitals in the region. Vicki didn't have to. Harrison's hand would have reached out to her everywhere and turned her life into a struggle for existence. There were now two ways out, either to look for work in other areas that had nothing to do with medicine or to sell the apartment and leave as far as possible from these places. Vicki did not have any skills other than medical skills. She could, of course, get a job as a cleaning lady or try to learn to be a visual machine node operator. But in her mind, this would be the final fall from the height of exclusivity into the abyss of dullness in everyday life. All the other hospitals in the than medical skills. She could, of course, get a job as a cleaning lady or try to learn to be a visual machine node operator. But in her mind, this would be the final fall from the height of exclusivity into the abyss of dullness and everyday life. All the other hospitals in the city knew this man very well. Many even took from him a bad example in all its manifestations. Therefore, he hopes to get a vacancy in any of the hospitals in the region. Vicki didn't have to. Harrison's hand would have reached out to her everywhere and turned her life into a struggle for existence. There were now two ways out, either to look for work in other areas that had nothing to do with medicine or to sell the apartment and leave as far as possible from these places. Vicki did not have any skills other than medical skills. She could, of course, get a job as a cleaning lady or try to learn to be a visual machine node operator. But in her mind, this would be the final fall from the height of exclusivity into the abyss of dullness and everyday life. Many even took from him a bad example in all its manifestations. Therefore, he hopes to get a vacancy in any of the hospitals in the region. Vicki didn't have to. Harrison's hand would have reached out to her everywhere and turned her life into a struggle for existence. There were now two ways out, either to look for work in other areas that had nothing to do with medicine, or to sell the apartment and leave as far as possible from these places. Vicki did not have any skills other than medical skills. She could, of course, get a job as a cleaning lady or try to learn to be a visual machine node operator. But in her mind, this would be the final fall from the height of exclusivity into the abyss of dullness in everyday life. Many even took from him a bad example in all its manifestations. Therefore, he hopes to get a vacancy in any of the hospitals in the region. Vicki didn't have to. Harrison's hand would have reached out to her everywhere and turned her life into a struggle for existence. There were now two ways out, either to look for work in other areas that had nothing to do with medicine, or to sell the apartment and leave as far as possible from these places. Vicki did not have any skills other than medical skills. She could, of course, get a job as a cleaning lady or try to learn to be a visual machine node operator, but in her mind this would be the final fall from the height of exclusivity into the abyss of dullness and everyday life. Harrison's hand would have reached out to her everywhere and turned her life into a struggle for existence. There were now two ways out, either to look for work in other areas that had nothing to do with medicine, or to sell the apartment and leave as far as possible from these places. Vicki did not have any skills other than medical skills. She could, of course, get a job as a cleaning lady or try to learn to be a visual machine node operator. But in her mind, this would be the final fall from the height of exclusivity into the abyss of dullness in everyday life. Harrison's hand would have reached out to her everywhere and turned her life into a struggle for existence. There were now two ways out, either to look for work in other areas that had nothing to do with medicine, or to sell the apartment and leave as far as possible from these places. Vicki did not have any skills other than medical skills. She could, of course, get a job as a cleaning lady or try to learn to be a visual machine node operator, but in her mind, this would be the final fall from the height of exclusivity into the abyss of dullness and everyday life. Skills of the surgeon over time could be completely wasted. This Vicki felt with all her being. She only hoped for one thing. The black bar ends and she picks up the scalpel again. But the streak for these 2 weeks, which she worked out before her dismissal, merged with the horizon, leaving no hope for White. So option number 2, you need to fight for yourself to the last, but not with someone to fight for something. Not alone. Harrison lives this world. Among the 8 billion people inhabiting the planet, it is impossible not to find a worthy place for yourself. The philosophy we have is the strength of the wiki further and further and further from reality. As reality approaches closer and closer to it. But for now, you just need to find Kevin. She will have time to deal with the work later. Vicki couldn't explain to herself this overwhelming desire to know that all was well with this person. How good is it overall? Maybe a man without a fixed place of residence, at least for her peace of mind. It will be enough that he is alive and relatively healthy. No one could help her right now, but she could at least be of some help to Kevin. Maybe it was this circumstance that made Vicki feel the need to look for a missing person. No one can, but she can. There she is, Vicki Johnson, still exceptional no matter what. On Friday, she got to the migration unit because she did not receive an answer to her application, which she submitted through the website for a whole week. After getting her boss to accept her, she sat in his office for an hour, listening to information that had nothing to do with Kevin. From all that has been said, it only became clear that the local migration service knows nothing about such a person. A man of no fixed abode, at least for her peace of mind. It will be enough that he is alive and relatively healthy. No one could help her right now, but she could at least be of some help to Kevin. Maybe it was this circumstance that made Vicki feel the need to look for a missing person. No one can, but she can. There she is, Vicki Johnson. Still exceptional no matter what. On Friday, she got to the migration unit because she did not receive an answer to her application, which she submitted through the website for a whole week. After getting her boss to accept her, she sat in his office for an hour, listening to information that had nothing to do with Kevin. From all that has been said, it only became clear that the local migration service knows nothing about such a person. A man of no fixed abode, at least for her peace of mind. It will be enough that he is alive and relatively healthy. No one could help her right now, but she could at least be of some help to Kevin. Maybe it was this circumstance that made Vicki feel the need to look for a missing person. No one can, but she can. There she is, Vicki Johnson. Still exceptional, no matter what. On Friday, she got to the migration unit because she did not receive an answer to her application, which she submitted through the website for a whole week. After getting her boss to accept her, she sat in his office for an hour, listening to information that had nothing to do with Kevin. From all that has been said, it only became clear that the local migration service knows nothing about such a person. For her peace of mind, it will be enough that he is alive and relatively healthy. No one could help her right now, but she could at least be of some help to Kevin. Maybe it was this circumstance that made Vicki feel the need to look for a missing person. No one can, but she can. There she is, Vicki Johnson, still exceptional no matter what. On Friday, she got to the migration unit because she did not receive an answer to her application, which she submitted through the website for a whole week. After getting her boss to accept her, she sat in his office for an hour, listening to information that had nothing to do with Kevin. From all that has been said, it only became clear that the local migration service knows nothing about such a person. For her peace of mind, it will be enough that he is alive and relatively healthy. No one could help her right now, but she could at least be of some help to Kevin. Maybe it was this circumstance that made Vicki feel the need to look for a missing person. No one can, but she can. There she is, Vicki Johnson. Still exceptional no matter what. On Friday, she got to the migration unit because she did not receive an answer to her application, which she submitted through the website for a whole week. After getting her boss to accept her, she sat in his office for an hour, listening to information that had nothing to do with Kevin. From all that has been said, it only became clear that the local migration service knows nothing about such a person. No one could help her right now, but she could at least be of some help to Kevin. Maybe it was this circumstance that made Vicki feel the need to look for a missing person. No one can, but she can. There she is, Vicki Johnson. Still exceptional no matter what. On Friday, she got to the migration unit because she did not receive an answer to her application, which she submitted through the website for a whole week. After getting her boss to accept her, she sat in his office for an hour, listening to information that had nothing to do with Kevin. From all that has been said, it only became clear that the local migration service knows nothing about such a person. No one could help her right now, but she could at least be of some help to Kevin. Maybe it was this circumstance that made Vicki feel the need to look for a missing person. No one can, but she can. There she is, Vicki Johnson. Still exceptional no matter what. On Friday, she got to the migration unit because she did not receive an answer to her application, which she submitted through the website for a whole week. After getting her boss to accept her, she sat in his office for an hour, listening to information that had nothing to do with Kevin. From all that has been said, it only became clear that the local migration service knows nothing about such a person. But she can. There she is, Vicki Johnson. Still exceptional no matter what. On Friday, she got to the migration unit because she did not receive an answer to her application, which she submitted through the website for a whole week. After getting her boss to accept her, she sat in his office for an hour, listening to information that had nothing to do with Kevin. From all that has been said, it only became clear that the local migration service knows nothing about such a person. But she can. There she is, Vicki Johnson, still exceptional no matter what. On Friday, she got to the migration unit because she did not receive an answer to her application, which she submitted through the website for a whole week. After getting her boss to accept her, she sat in his office for an hour, listening to information that had nothing to do with Kevin. From all that has been said, it only became clear that the local migration service knows nothing about such a person. And where should I go? Vicki said in confusion. We can send your request to the region, the major answered her. Try your luck there, but you'd better go there in person. We've been having a constant technical problem with the site lately. But don't you have a common base of citizens? The major smiled. There is information, he said. Access is limited to the area. I don't think your case concerns a person that not everyone is supposed to know about. But still, the attempt is not torture. Suddenly they will tell you something more specific than I can find out. Well, agreed with the major. Vicki, in fact, could not disagree and demand something else. On Tuesday, Vicki went to the regional center. It was bitter cold outside. The minibus in which she was traveling stalled halfway, and the passengers waited for almost an hour until they were transferred to another. They barely made it to the migration one before the end of the work shift. It was almost 17. 0 on the clock. When she entered the chief's office, he was not as verbose as his provincial colleague. Maybe because he was in a hurry to get home. Maybe because he did not consider it necessary to be verbose in this case. The conversation ended with the fact that he advised Vicki to contact the main directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces. No more, no less. At first, Vicki thought it was such a joke, but the lieutenant colonel looked stern. Are you seriously? She couldn't help but express her surprise. Quite. We can't help from our side. But there is some circumstantial evidence indicating that the General Staff may know about your Johnson. Unless, of course, this is the Johnson. Are there any other questions? I don't have. Almost like a soldier, Vicki answered, and left the office. On Wednesday morning, she went to her last shift. As usual, a familiar shop ran in to buy groceries for lunch, paid, went outside, and had already taken a few steps when she heard a voice behind her. Girl, I'm sorry. She turned around and was stunned. Here's someone she didn't expect to see. Although at first I was afraid it was them that stood in front of her, the same two guys who tried to rob her 2 weeks ago in the lobby. However, they looked completely different now. The lanky one had a Gibson cast right arm up to the very elbow, and the face of his friend, who danced in front of Kevin with a knife, looked more like sweat, in places a pumpkin. What do you want? Taking a step back, asked Vicki. Wait, the lanky one said, stuttering a little. We would like to ask your forgiveness for that incident in the store. Vicki could not believe her ears, and the guy continued. Here, take it. He handed her a $500 bill. This is moral compensation for you, so to speak, damage. Yes, I don't need your money. Vicki stepped back one more step. Remove your apologies, and I don't need anything. Do you remember what you did to that person? It is from him that you should ask for forgiveness, not from me. I forgot about you a long time ago. We are for the lanky. We have already asked his forgiveness. You see, he raised his broken arm. Compensation is also in full order. Do you want to say that it is you, so? Take it, please. Pumpkin Man entered into the conversation. Do not refuse, otherwise we are finished. So where is Kevin, then? All is well with him. Can you tell me where I can find it? Cannot. The lanky one shook his head, not ordered. Just give it away. This is... He again handed Vicki a $500 bill. Take it, do not refuse. But at least he's healthy and in the city. Healthy. But now we don't know where. We have been waiting for you here for 3 days. Okay, Vicki took the money. What if you meet him again? No. The second waved his hands, God forbid. We are leaving the city right now, so we won't date anyone. This is how you forgive yourself. It's time for us already." "Well, okay," said Vicki, looking at the back of the departing guys with a quick step. "What a twist," she said out loud to herself and turned around and smiled. To the hospital. A ticket to New York and back was not so cheap. So the money received from the criminals, although they burned the pocket, fell in place. In the reserved seat car there was a cheerful fuss and confusion. It had been a long time since Vicki had gone anywhere by train, and she was completely out of the habit of such a mess. But it didn't bother her at all. She herself was surprised by this fact. On the contrary, she was glad that life around her was in full swing. They ran around the wagon. The children talked about all sorts of trifles with each other. Adults laying out bags and suitcases, smoked sausage, pickles, herring. How did she miss it? Her mother died while she was in medical school. She did not know her father at all. He left the family when she was barely 4 years old, so there was no one to ride for a long time. Vicki herself, being a human being, scrupulous in detail, demanding of herself and others, seemed to those around her cold, too reasonable, and almost impregnable. She was a perfectionist in every sense of the word, and because of this, she rarely found friends for herself, and even less often those who would promise to share with her not only dinner, but also bed. For a surgeon, this quality guaranteed success. And just a woman created a bunch of problems. Despite the fact that Vicki's appearance was quite attractive and even beautiful, slender legs to which men first of all reacted, a pleasant round face with gray eyes and a wonderfully removed, neat nose, full lips, usually not inherent in the owner of a strong character. Everything about her was as it should be, but the men seemed to be afraid of her. Only twice did Vicki manage to get close enough to someone, the first time at the institute and the second time at the hospital. And both of these ties broke off before they had time to mature before talking about marriage at the institute. Her first boyfriend transferred to the medical academy and invited her to Boston with him, to which, of course, received a refusal. In the hospital, Adam and Brandon were generally short, only a week long. It ended on its own for no particular reason. Adam is passionate, making both of them forget about everything in the world as if burned down like a darling in a fire. But with Brendan, they managed to remain friends, and never for several years, did not even try to resurrect what had died irrevocably. And there were no more men in her life. With the character of Vicki, unpleasant changes began to occur. Gone was the scrupulousness. The details of things in the house and at work began to slip away from attention in the wrong place where they were supposed to be. Vicki was already afraid that if she were to return to the operating room again, she would not be able to do the work she once knew how to do. She became different. Either adversity was able to jump Vicki, and she changed so much, or it was her own choice. While we are poorly aware, but still her. But now she was sitting on the train and smiling. She was surrounded by happy people, and this happiness, as if she was giving birth. Not far away. It was already New Year and Christmas. School holidays have begun where all these people went to visit relatives or friends. Maybe to a winter camp or even to a Christmas tree. The smell of tangerines wafted through the reserved seat. Even more aggravated thoughts about the new year. And where was she going? To the main directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces. Tell which of the fellow travelers I wish they were surprised. And the new year she copes with no one. Previously, at least, she came to a hospital corporate party, but now she has been ordered to go there. And such anguish was suddenly brought into these thoughts about the upcoming holiday that the smile fell from her face and she was ready to cry now. A voice brought her out of her confusion. The girls ran up close to her and held out a mandarin in her direction. And where was she going? To the main directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces. Tell which of the fellow travelers I wish they were surprised. And the new year she copes with no one. Previously, at least, she came to a hospital corporate party, but now she has been ordered to go there. And such anguish was suddenly brought into these thoughts about the upcoming holiday that the smile fell from her face and she was ready to cry now. A voice brought her out of her confusion. The girls ran up close to her and held out a mandarin in her direction. And where was she going? To the main directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces. Tell which of the fellow travelers, I wish they were surprised. And the New Year she copes with no one. Previously, at least she came to a hospital corporate party, but now she has been ordered to go there. And such anguish was suddenly brought into these thoughts about the upcoming holiday, that the smile fell from her face, and she was ready to cry now. A voice brought her out of her confusion. The girls ran up close to her and held out a mandarin in her direction. "Auntie," she said in a thin voice, "take it. It is for you." "Thank you." Vicki accepted the gift and smiled again. "Do not be sad," the girl added. "Everything will be fine." No, thought Vicki. I'm doing everything right. Somewhere very, very deeply, she catches this new feeling that made her sit on the train. Not just gratitude to Kevin for standing up for her, but more of a desire to see him again. Vicki has so many questions for this person. Firstly, how could he get to such a life that he had to win back from the battery and stores? She herself fell into the abyss. Who knows what awaits her in 5 years? He will sell the apartment and leave, and everything can go wrong there. Losing money will become the same person, without a fixed place of residence, with the lost skills of a surgeon, and with the inability to learn something else. Secondly, who was this Kevin before he was on the street? He instilled such fear in those two bandits that he could not even believe that such a thing was even possible, if he alone could do such a thing. The fact that he is a terminator, if he has connections in some kind of power or criminal circles, then why does he wear sweatshirts and is not even able to knock out a bed for himself? There are many questions in the hospital and a great desire to help him, maybe even invite to itself 31 December. Why not? If Vicki wanted to share the New Year's table with anyone, then it was with him that the train arrived in the capital in the morning. In New York, she was only once very young. What struck her now was that there was no snow to be seen anywhere. It's not like it's winter, now participated in the central region, and something in between a warm autumn or a cold summer. Even the grass on the lawns was green. Garlands were hung everywhere. Christmas trees were set up. Shop windows were full of Santa Claus and snow for centuries. It didn't take long for Vicki to get to the General Staff building, arrived in time for the very beginning of the work shift. At the entrance, she was asked for documents. Purpose of the visit: they issued a pass, and in 5 minutes she was already in the waiting room of the right official. Soon he himself appeared, a tall, stately man, with the rank of colonel. Each new visit to the authorities' offices added exactly 1 star to their owners on shoulder straps. Vicki noted this for herself and ironically considered that the success of her enterprise was getting closer to a successful conclusion. It remains to get to the general. Leo turned to the colonel. The secretary is a girl for you. What is your question? The man turned to Vicki. I'm talking about Kevin, if that means anything to you. Yes, said Colonel Johnson, nodding his head. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Stiller from the migration warned me. Let's discuss in the office. Come on in. Vicki followed him into the office and closed the door behind her. Sit down. The man pointed to the chair. Do you want something? Tea, coffee? No, thanks. Vicki was surprised at the official's friendly tone. Usually they communicated with her rather dryly, but thank you. Fine, then straight to the point. Yes, Kevin is looking for you. Johnson. So. Can you tell us where and under what circumstances you met him? What did he seem like to you? Can you describe? The colonel's question was very strange. But Vicki can't hide anything this time. She told him everything about how she met him in the lobby of the store and how Harrison saw him out of the hospital. As for the description, she concluded, a very good man, correct. The image of a bum did not fit in any way with him. And it looked strong, so stocky. You understand, with one blow to knock down such a person, right? After all, these guys later found me, and as they put it, gave me $500 as compensation. One had a broken arm, and the other had it instead, face bruised. The colonel suddenly laughed. I recognize, he said through laughter. I recognize Kevin, his handwriting. So where has he been hiding all this time? He is still in your city. Do you know him? Once again, Vicki was surprised, not answering the man's question. Now, just a second. The colonel opened a desk drawer and took out a thick album, in which photographs are usually stored, just in case I brought it from home. If it turns out that you are looking for the same Kevin, drop by. You will recognize someone. Vicki picked up the album and looked at the photographs pointed out by the colonel. Here, she pointed with her finger. It's Kevin, only young. The colonel looked across the table. Are you sure? He asked. Certainly, and here you are. Vicki pointed to the guy who was hugging Kevin's shoulder. Accurately confirmed, Colonel. I'm a little older than Kevin and in a higher position, but we started together, and he, like a brother, covered my back more than once. Let me, and the man returned the album to the box. So, he's the one. And you have no idea how happy I am. But you still haven't answered my question. Is he still in town? I don't know. Vicki shrugged her shoulders. The guys who gave me the money didn't really say anything. Possibly in the city. So you don't have any data either. Vicki Johnson, the man said, smiling. You now have the latest and most accurate data I have been able to dig up for a long time. I've been looking for Kevin for the past 5 years since then, however. This is probably not worth it. You are just smart. I don't even know how to thank you for what you did. What is the act? Objected Vicki. I'm just another person. That's it, dear. And look for him. Or they could just forget the very next day how he was taken away from the hospital. He is nobody to you. Think I stood up for you. You did everything you could for him. Even he from work asked you because of this. There are so many indifferent people around now. Are you an exception? Stop. Vicki didn't like this word. Tell me, would you rather help me find it? Do you have such an opportunity? Well, of course. Here, take it. The colonel handed Vicki a business card. If you suddenly meet Kevin in the city, be sure to call me. I, in turn, will certainly contact you if I find traces of him. Just leave your phone number for me. Well, Vicki agreed. Mirrors on a piece of paper your number. What should I tell you about you if I meet Kevin? Tell me that a friend is looking for him easier. What will he understand? Farewell was my call sign. Do you know what his call sign was? No? God. Wow. But yes, Kevin. Do you have any idea what he did for us? Saved so many lives. But unfortunately, I can't tell you about that either. In general, I will connect all the resources to find it. You can be sure of this. Glad to hear it. I'll complain right now and start, the colonel concluded, and softly slammed his palms on the table. Leo. There was a voice from the switchboard to the secretary. Meeting in 5 minutes. Understood, Melanie, he answered. I'm already running. But he turned to Vicki. On that, let me say goodbye to you. Now things, and hopefully see you again. Goodbye. Vicki said goodbye to the colonel and left the office. December 31 came. The last week before the new year flew by so quickly that Vicki was even surprised to look at the calendar in the morning. All this time she waited for news from the colonel, but nothing happened. The phone was silent. Kevin didn't make himself known either. She finally decided to put the apartment up for sale. But no one was in a hurry to call her about this. Everyone was preparing for the holiday and potential buyers and banks and a notary's office. Things were entirely subordinated to only one goal: to let go of everything old and tune in for a better future, which will certainly come with the last chimes of this year. And the closer it was to zero, the more cloudy it became in Vicki's soul. Will all her efforts be fruitless? So much energy was spent, so many nerves, so many hopes not justified, and yellowed leaves fell. Deep in the heart, Vicki could no longer be alone in the house. Here, even the walls began to put pressure on her, and everything fell out of hand. She went out into the street with no particular purpose. She just walked and walked, turning into the first alleys that came across in the evening to thicken in large flakes. Snow was falling, slowly clogging the spiral cars from under the lanterns, fussily scurrying around supermarkets like sharks, looking for more and gaping prey. People were in a hurry to buy more food for the table or gifts. If they were suddenly invited to visit, Vicki peered into the faces of passers-by, hoping to see among them the only one whom he would never forget. Maybe New Year's miracles still come true. Suddenly the phone rang. Vicki saw an unfamiliar number but decided to answer. Some buyer could call. Yes, Vicki Johnson, a male voice came from the other end. Yes, I'm listening to you. Could you come to the 4th hospital now? For what? Who is speaking? Leo asked. Do you have any news on the subject you are interested in? Vicki's heart was pounding. Here it is, a New Year's miracle. Has Kevin been found? But why isn't Leo himself calling? And why do you need to go to the hospital? Has something happened to Kevin again? Okay, said Vicki. I'll be right back in 20 minutes. Go straight to Harrison's office. We are there now. Okay. Also to Harrison's office. Strange, Vicki thought. Joy somehow lurked inside. The situation was too ambiguous. Brandon was already waiting at the entrance to Vicki's front desk. He nervously smoked, standing in one dressing gown. Hi, Vicki, he said when he saw the girl. Hello. Why are you undressed on the street? Yes, nonsense. She waved her hand. What's happened? Brendan giggled. Such a lost walker is sad. No one has ever seen him like this. Regarding you, he has a conversation with incomprehensible people in the office of the military. Some in uniform. And you were on duty in the new year? Yes. Why should I be at home alone? Happy New Year, by the way. And the same for you, Vicki smiled, taking off her coat in the restroom. I'll go. I know that they need me. Come on, good luck. Yeah, Vicki nodded, exhaled and cheerfully shagoled to Harrison's office. In the office she was met by 3 people, 2 military men, one of them a major, and the other a lieutenant colonel and Jacob himself. The military stood, and the head sat on a chair with a red face, absently looking at his boots. You sit down, Vicki Johnson. Having introduced himself, Vicki suggested the major. Vicki silently sat away from Harrison. Now he was especially unpleasant to her. First of all, the major began, we would like to thank you from Leo. He, unfortunately, could not come, but you may still see with him. Thanks to you, a very important person was found for him. I found it, Vicki exclaimed enthusiastically. How is he? Where is he? I'm fine. Do not worry. The lieutenant colonel joined the conversation and looked at his watch. Soon you yourself will be able to talk to him. Vicki wanted to say something else, but the officer stopped her with a wave of his hand. It's all after, he continued. First, I have to tell you something, Jacob. Harrison looked pitifully at the lieutenant colonel, then lowered his eyes again and pressed his lips tightly together. The color on his face was already purplish. He looked angrily at Vicki and almost said through his teeth, Vicki Johnson, I want to ask your forgiveness for what I did to you unfairly. And he fell silent. And vilely, the lieutenant colonel added for him. And rightly so, repeated Harrison. Vicky's mind was all over the place. Recently, this was a third person asking her forgiveness. If it was still possible to somehow expect such words from the bandits, such words from Harrison could not even be dreamed of in a dream. Something has definitely happened to this world. In general, quite legally, V, the head, concluded, I was wrong. And from tomorrow, I believe I am retiring my powers. And you will take my place. Vicki Johnson, I have already signed the order. What? Vicki almost whispered, I don't understand anything. What's going on here? Nothing special. Vicki Johnson. The Major spoke again. Everything just falls into place and justice triumphs. What do you say about this? We could have done everything officially through the courts of dozens of other instances, but we preferred to speed up the process, especially since today is such a holiday. Do you agree? Aye, of course. But thoughts began to gradually take shape. Yes, I accept your apologies. Vicki turned. And as for my appointment, can I still think about it? Of course, said the lieutenant colonel. It's up to you to decide. We do not force you. You can do surgery again if you want. You can combine the work of the head and the practicing surgeon. There are many options. Thank you, Vicki said softly, and tell Leo that I am very grateful to him. We'll be sure to pass it on. Kevin, when I can see. The lieutenant colonel looked at his watch again. Perhaps, he said, right now you can. Vicki jumped up from the chair where you go to the restroom. Perhaps he is already waiting for you. Thank you, the girl blurted out and rushed out of the office. She opened the door to the restroom with bated breath. Entering Vicki, she froze for a second. At the table sat a man of about 35 in an elegant suit, in which she did not immediately recognize that bum. Kevin, she whispered, is that you? The man smiled and stood up from his chair. Vicki Johnson. Vicki was about to throw herself into his arms, but restrained herself, assuming that perhaps this man had become so close to her lately. He then perhaps did not think about her at all for the last half a month. Kevin seemed to read her thoughts. He approached her and gently hugged her. I was so worried about you, she said. You have no idea. Looked for you everywhere. It even made it to New York. I know, Kevin said calmly, releasing the girl from his embrace and sitting back on the chair. Why didn't you show up to me earlier? Where have you been? Long story. Kevin waved it off. Sad and uninteresting. I didn't mean to make your life difficult. But then my good friend found me and explained how the help you gave me turned out to be for you. I couldn't hide anymore. It was necessary to restore justice. Who were you hiding from? How did it happen that you ended up on the street? This costume really suits you, and the role of the homeless is not yours at all. Hiding from myself. So life turned around. There was a lot to think about. Put everything in its place. Didn't you choose the best way to think about it? Vicki noticed. And Leo was looking for you for so long. With Leo, we served together. Yes. He told me quite a bit about the fact that his call sign was farewell. And your God? Yes, exactly. That's where it all started. One of the many hot spots in the East where I've been lucky, so to speak. Be in intelligence, and we served with Leo back to back, as they say. He was my commander. We saved a lot of innocent lives back then. Many plans of the enemy were revealed. But while I served the motherland, my wife took a lover. I was told by our mutual friends. I could not stand it. I asked for a vacation. Came home to find out what was wrong. My wife did not play up, she said. Either I live with her, I don't go anywhere else, or she and her daughter will go to the same one in her. Well, you see, I tried to save our marriage. I could not imagine that my daughter would live with her stepfather. I left intelligence. I couldn't think of anything else. And everything seemed to be fine. My daughter got a job, and my wife started to get used to me again. I looked again with love as before. But one day I got into an accident, went on a business trip for work, and a scorcher flew into me. One, he is dead. I stayed alive, and then it began. This reckless driver turned out to be the son of a local prosecutor. It was like it wasn't my fault, but everyone tried to blame me. Even the fact that he was drunk was removed from the protocol. For almost 2 years I was thrashed. But in the end, my lawyers were able to prove my innocence. The wife did not wait for the trial. She could not stand all these problems and left me for her boss. And she refused to see her daughter. But in the end, my lawyers were able to prove my innocence. The wife did not wait for the trial. She could not stand all these problems and left me for her boss. And she refused to see her daughter. But in the end, my lawyers were able to prove my innocence. The wife did not wait for the trial. She could not stand all these problems and left me for her boss. And she refused to see her daughter. I gave them a home, didn't apply for any exchanges. And so I was left without a job, without a wife, without a daughter, and without an apartment, and lost in life. It seemed strong in spirit, but broke down having lost his family. And there were no friends to help. I never had any friends in civilian life. My parents raised me with my grandmother. Mother to save me for her, but she herself never showed up again in her whole life. When they were drafted into the army, my grandmother died. I had nowhere to go back to civilian life. Her houses burned down, and the village was completely without people. And very quickly, after the army, I decided to enter a military school. And there it went. You won't envy, Vicki said with regret. No, it's all right now. Yes, enough about me. Do you know what I want to offer you? What, are you free tonight? Of course. Of course. How do you look at celebrating this new year with me? Vicki clapped her hands happily. I look extremely positively, she said with a smile. I have a place booked in a restaurant. Live music, carnival, and all that. And the main surprise for you, surprise. Let's go, I just need to dress up. It's not at home to go to a restaurant. No problem. We'll get to you. Then why are we sitting? Go, go. And they ran out of the hospital, not noticing anyone in their path. Vicki had already forgotten about the offer to head the department and about Harrison, who, if he was released, would probably already be drunk from frustration. She forgot about all the hardships that almost broke her during this difficult month. It seemed to her that she and Kevin had always been together, and everything else was just a dream. On the street, the snow intensified and everything around was shrouded in a white haze. They were riding in a taxi, tightly clasping their hands to each other, and it seemed to them that unknown forces were now taking them to a fairyland, where they would find for themselves everything that they had been looking for so long, and from which they would never return back to this unfortunate city. They were together, and they were still exceptional.